I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the most haunted city on earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And today we are here with Aubrey. She might seem familiar to some of y'all with us doing the interviews at the Sorrel-Weed House for our series that is coming out soon. So, Aubrey is a tour guide here in Savannah, if you're not familiar with that yet. So we are going to be talking about other Savannah ghosts, though, and Aubrey's got some different experiences, too, outside of the Sorrel-Weed House. So you'll definitely get more of your Sorrel-Weed House fix from those other episodes. But Aubrey, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, not much to say. My name's Aubrey. I've been in the Savannah area for roughly 5 years now, and if we're going to get into the paranormal stuff, my paranormal lifestyle started all the way back when I was 2, long before I moved here back in Maryland, and honestly, didn't expect to be a tour guide, didn't expect to be a ghost guide specifically, just so happened to end up working in haunted locations and somehow found my way there. So.
Sure, absolutely. Now, you said that you lived in a haunted house. Do you want to kind of like tell some of your favorite stories from that?
Yeah, so I grew up in the house. I was there from the age of 2 to about 10, and I kind of assumed it was haunted. I'm more of a sensitive, so I'm definitely open to a lot of the spiritual stuff, and I noticed that there was always a kid that would steal my toys, which is expected. You know, I'm young, and there's a kid. Of course he's going to steal my toys. That's what kids do. And I would always be upset about it and would always complain to my mom about it, but, you know, she's like, well, you just misplaced it. You're just a kid. You probably lost it. It's probably underneath the bed. It's fine. So she never kind of bought into any of it. And then, like most kids, I'd go and run with my friends behind the houses in the woods, not thinking about snakes or ticks or anything bad like that. And I had vaguely remembered coming across a cemetery, and it's like, oh, cemetery, back to playing, just kind of disregarded it. But my grandmother still owns the house to this day, and so then I was eventually kind of curious who this kid was. So I went back to visit her, found the cemetery again, and discovered that there was, in fact, one grave for one kid. And what's really interesting is the kid that I kept seeing looked like he was 4 or 5 years old, dressed in like black shorts with a white button-up shirt and black vest. So that would put him at roughly the 1800s I'd put him at. And so found one grave for one kid, died when he was 4 years, 11 months in the late 1880s. Then I was like, well, found out his name's Frank, named him Frank, and he's responded well to it. And since my grandmother still has the house, I still have some of my childhood toys down in the basement for him to play with. Aww. Whatever makes him happy, I'll still visit and say hi. So he's kind of like a long-term dead pen pal at this point, I guess, is the best way to put it.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it's always so interesting to hear people's experiences with their house spirits, especially if they're sensitive to spirits. And it's really sweet that you leave toys for them, because I grew up in a haunted house as well. In Florida, though, which has a whole different realm of spirits. My spirits in my house were a Native American family that lived on the property, because my family built the house on this big open piece of land. And we realized that it was an area where a tribe had been, because we looked into the history of the land, found that out. My interactions were not like that. My spirits did not take my toys at all, but they would, wake me up by like grabbing my shoulders and shaking me, and like, usually when they were in a panic of some sort, for whatever reason they might be. But did you ever have like kind of any experiences like that where they interacted with you outside of just like taking toys and things like that?
Not really. There were actually quite a few spirits on the property that were spread out through the neighborhood. I found out after doing some research that apparently the neighborhood was initially back in the mid-1800s apple orchard plantation.
Oh.
And so there were some other spirits. Some of them weren't as friendly. There was one that I kind of dubbed him as the slave master because I'm pretty sure that's what he did. And he's, as I'm sure you can imagine, not the nicest guy. And so usually Frank and I would just kind of hide out in my room and kind of did like the buddy system anywhere we went. So he'd like share the bed with me, and if Slave Master was around, we'd try to avoid that room at all cost. So
Wow.
that was the extent of it. Slave Masters never actually like physically harm me or anything, but you would just get that really uneasy of, he doesn't like me, I don't like him, I don't want to be near this area, I want to get out.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's a very fair assessment. And I think people tend to forget that sometimes intelligent hauntings, can be an unkind spirit because they were unkind in their life, but not be demonic or, malevolent. They're just a bad person because we do tend to also separate the two where like we like to almost forget that this was a human being at some point, and not all humans were good people. So
Oh yeah. I mean, there are plenty of people you encounter in daily living where you're like, that guy creeps me out, or
Yeah.
that person has a bad, energy about them. So yeah, it would absolutely transfer into death, especially somebody who lived by fear. If you were in that position, your whole existence was about being cruel and instilling fear so that you would have authority.
Yeah,
Definitely.
now, is there like a certain ghost experience that you have that like was like one that really stood out to you, or like what was like your first ghost experience?
Oh gosh, I don't really remember my first. Again, as soon as I moved into the house at 2 years old, and right off the bat, when I met Frank, I started having stuff happen by way of playing with him. The only, I think, main thing that really stood out for my childhood was I had gone on a family trip to Italy, and we were staying in an 800-year-old villa. Surprise, surprise, of course it's haunted. And of course, I'm there with my family, so they don't listen to anything I have to say about that stuff because it's just all in my head. It's just an imaginary friend. But there were two little girls, and even worse, I was 10 years old at the time. I don't speak Italian, and they kept talking to me while I was trying to sleep, and they'd laugh, and they'd rummage through all the stuff in my suitcase, and they were messing with my items, and I don't know what they're saying, and they're laughing at me, and this happened every single night. So every single night, I had kept trying to go into my mom's room and be like, no, I'd rather stay in here, I can't sleep with the girls, they keep messing with my stuff, and it was just constant. Good news is she was traveling with her friend as well, and apparently her friend snored heavily, so they're like, let's do a switch off. Friend that snores all the time can have this room, and then I'll just hide in the bedroom with my mom and hope that the girls can kind of they can have my stuff, they can play with it, they can laugh, they can just leave me alone so I can sleep.
Absolutely.
So that one really stuck out a lot too.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting experience because I don't think I've ever encountered a spirit where I didn't necessarily speak the same language as them. So that's a fun encounter because it's like, how do you navigate that when there's that barrier between you? There's already a barrier because you're alive and they're not, but that's where you can't even say like, stop, like do not touch the things. It seems like a lot of kid ghosts are kind of like attracted to you.
Which is really funny because I really am not a fan of living children. I find them annoying. And I mentioned that a lot on my tours. Like, I love the kid ghosts, but only the kid ghosts. You bring a living kid on my tour, and then we've got issues because I just don't know how to handle them properly. It was never my thing. I never had that maternal instinct. So I'm just like, dead kids? Great. Living kids? I don't know what to do.
I guess because dead kids have their own way of being. They kind of like they don't have rules necessarily, so they just kind of do what they want, which takes the pressure off of you're already dead. Well, it's you can kind of do whatever you want at this point. So you said you worked in the Kehoe House. Have you ever had any experience with kid ghosts in the Kehoe House?
Oh boy, I've had an experience with all the spirits there. We're on a first name basis after the time that I spent there. I worked there for about 3 years ago, and I worked there about a year ago for 3 years, and from the first day that I was being interviewed, I ran into Miss Kehoe. She was just kind of sitting in one of the rooms. I was like, oh, there's a lady sitting in the chair. Cool. And then I kind of just like continue with my tour, continue to see what's going on here. Eventually start working there. And then I discovered there's also Mr. Kehoe there, their daughter Annie, which is interesting because this kind of touches base with what we were talking about at the Sorrel-Weed house, how you could sometimes change your age when you're dead. Well, Annie only was about 8 days old when she died, but she shows up as an 8-year-old girl. So she responds to Annie, and so it makes sense that she could be Annie, maybe manipulating her age, but at the same time, it could just be a completely different Annie. We're not 100% sure, but either way, she's there, and she is such a sweet little bundle of fun. She likes to play hide and seek a lot, and she'll play peekaboo with the covers, and she'll just run up and down the stairs, say hi, mess with you, especially if you're a girl with long hair. She'll braid your hair sometimes, and you can kind of feel that. And then generally, young boys are going to be kind of rambunctious in a handful. That's usually how it works. And they do have another kid there who I don't think is tied to the Kehoes, but is tied to the property. And he would usually be the prankster. He's the one that would lock me out of the rooms if I had to go do something just to be kind of rude and a jerk. I could go through all 5 master keys, go through every individual room key, can't get the door open. Have my coworker go up to open the door. Oh, Aubrey, it's already unlocked. What are you talking about? Of course it is. He gave me a slight joke shove when I was trying to get out a window balcony, which initially I get that instinct of, oh my God, I'm going to fall. I'm going to fall off a balcony. I'm going to die. But also it's like, no, it's just him. He's not actually trying to harm me. He just wants to give me that little jump scare spook that he has a tendency to do. So definitely a lot there by way of kids, adults, everyone.
Wow. Yeah, because it's funny because the Kehoe House, for those of you listening who are not super familiar with the Kehoe House, it's an adults-only like hotel. So it's so ironic that there are so many kid ghosts, but there's also like a lot of misinformation with the stories of the Kehoe house because of the twins dying in the fireplace.
Fireplace. What a horrible
a
legend.
horrible eggs, right? So basically how the story goes was that the twin boys, they liked playing hide and seek, which I mean is common for kids obviously, but they would often hide in the fireplace. And one night Miss Kehoe set a fire in the fireplace at the main floor or whatever it was, and because the fireplaces are all in one chimney, the kids ended up burning alive because of the fire down below them. And so their dad essentially unknowingly murdered his kids. But
common theme throughout Savannah is the unwitting parent killing child stories.
Yeah, even though it's not true.
It's not.
It's
not
a true story, and there's no documentation of it. But I wonder how like Mr. Kehoe as a spirit would feel about, hearing that it's like, oh, everybody talks about how you killed your kids, it's
well, we talked about this a lot on the podcast is when you have ghost stories and people tell a ghost story over and over and over again, and that ghost story was the children in the building, it marks the building as child friendly for ghosts. This could be a haven for a ghost to show up, and all you really got to do is run around, jiggle the doorknobs a little, respond. And that's one of those things where sometimes the function of being a ghost does fall upon spirits. And there are a lot of homeless spirits out there, a lot of spirits that don't have the house to haunt, that don't have, the wrong to set right. They are just simply in between existences. And they're looking for a place that they can get attention, where people will give them some form of interaction. And you go to a big haunted house and people are looking for children ghosts, and people are talking about children ghosts, and they tell the story standing in front of the house. It's so inviting for a spirit to want to be in a place that accepts their existence, that cherishes their existence, that will actually literally say, this place is haunted, and not board up the windows and run screaming from the building. So, I think that in a lot of cases, ghosts will gravitate to places where ghost stories are told, simply because that means there's acceptance and that people are already in the habit of believing. They're already willing to give a little of themselves for the mystique and the mystery. So, yeah.
Well, Out of the ghosts that you talked about in the Kehoe House, the one that really piques my curiosity is the Annie, who was 8 days old when she died, and now looks like she's 8 years old. That's a big jump.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's very rare to see a spirit manipulate their age in that way.
To an age that they never were.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times an older spirit will show up as their child self, but a younger spirit showing up as an older version of themselves is very intriguing. It's like, it opens a lot of doors for conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's kind of like your take on why you think, because I don't know if you know more history about Annie than we would, because I'm not super familiar with Annie. Do you have like kind of any ideas of why you think she's showing up as an 8-year-old versus an 8-day-old?
It's not undocumented that we've had these reports before in the paranormal field where they would have someone like, and I know mediums have especially kind of touched base on this, where you'd have infant that died at a young age due to just malnourished, not thriving, anything like that. And then a medium would be able to have a conversation and explain to the parents, yes, they're here and, you know, this is what's going on. So it wouldn't surprise me, but also you can't really do much at 8 days old. So this would give her a chance to still enjoy that piece of being a childhood, which she didn't get to do while she was alive. And plus, I know Miss Kehoe was quite fond of, well, not just her, but all of her children. She was a very nurturing mother, very, very well-groomed, perfect mother. Like, she is the ideal picture of the woman that's going to care, love, cherish everyone that comes into the home. So I think especially for Annie, you already have that attachment that Miss Kehoe has to her, being the daughter, and also the only child that she lost at a young age. And then Annie knowing that and accepting that and having that capability to potentially come back and getting to live a fairly good afterlife.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it even suggests that concept of nurturing a spirit. Miss Kehoe using her sorrow, her grief to think about the growth of Annie and think about what she would be like at 1 and what she would be like at 2, giving form to a spirit that is now vicariously existing in our world. It also touches upon the concept of long souls that, the concept of reincarnation, of in between life, you're planning to come to this world. And there's a lot of books. The one that comes to mind is Many Masters, Many Servants, which is about the idea that we live multiple lifetimes, and in the in-between of life, we kind of map out what we're going to do in the next life, who our parents are going to be, where we're going to come, and we come to this world full of it. And you hear this a lot about children from 1 to 3 talking about past lives, talking about in-between experiences, having these amazing conversations when they're very, very young about this concept of having a wisdom and having an identity and a thought process, which is interesting, because if you die at 8 days old, you might still have 1 foot in the in-between world, with a firm grasp of a lot of intelligence and a lot of life knowledge, and you could remain growing as that entity because you had a trajectory planned. It's an interesting theory, an interesting thought. I'm fascinated by the concept of reincarnation, past lives and past life regression, and even future life regression, which I've heard people have actually sat down and had progression, future life progression, like hypnotic episodes where they would talk about life, their next life. Because a lot of people talk about how people have past lives, but apparently there was one doctor who was able to progress people into recognizing their future lives.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Your kid, actually.
Yes, that is correct. That's how I got this involved.
Yes. Sushi had memories as a kid, right? Where they could...
Two very distinct memories. One as a murder victim.
That's it, yes.
And one as a old farmer.
Old farmer.
Well, and a distinct conversation they had with me when they were like 3 years old was when we were in heaven together. they said that we decided that because I was Sushi's son in the last life, that they would be my child in the next life.
I see.
And that was the conversation that we had. And apparently I came down and it ended with them saying, "You made me wait a long time," because I was 32 when they were born. And it was definitely like odd because the whole conversation was weird. It started with, they're 3 years old and they look at me and say, "Remember when I lost my teeth?" And it was like,
Oh my
you haven't
gosh.
even gotten all your teeth, A. B, we've never talked about teeth falling out. So out of the blue, we're eating breakfast and they're like, "Remember when my teeth fell out?" And I was like, "Your teeth never fell out." You know, "No, my teeth fell out. I was really sad because my teeth had fallen out." And I was like, "No, lived on the farm." "What are you saying?" And they went on to talk about being an old man and how they died. The truck was broken down, so they had to ride the tractor into town, and they got stuck on a train track and got hit by a train. And that whole story unfolded 3 years old, and none of that made sense. Not knowing that trucks break down, even like knowing that language, it's like, where are you getting this? What are they teaching you at daycare? and so it was just such a peculiar thing. But I at that point, that's actually when I picked up Many Masters, Many Servants. When I started really looking into this concept, because they kind of suggested that we were at a train station, and I rode a train back to Earth. And then they rode a train to their mother's belly. And it was like we're at the train station going, "So what about this life?" And and they were like, "Well, I'll be your kid." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I got on the train and then I apparently wasted 32 years
Without them.
without them. And they came back and like, "Geez."
And the other past life was like, what, they were a victim of Albert Fish?
That is correct.
Yeah.
It was very disturbing. And
JT's face just dropped.
I felt so guilty because so here's this story.
Yep.
Again, this is around the same time, 3 years old ish. We were playing in their bedroom, and they say they took Albert to jail in an ambulance. And out of the blue, they took Albert to jail in an ambulance, and I don't know what they're saying. I'm like, "Oh, what? Who is Albert, and why is he going to jail, and why in an ambulance?" And they said, "Oh, he's a bad man. He's such a bad man." And I was like, "Who is Albert?" And they go on to say, so the next phrases were, "He hurt me real bad. He took a whole week to eat me."
Ooh.
And when they said that, like, all the hair on the back of my neck stood up, because I remembered distinctly Albert Fish wrote a letter to his first victim's family. And in the letter, he states, "I took a week to eat her." And her name was Gracie Budd. And Gracie Budd, the picture of Gracie Budd that they had looked exactly like Sushi. It was eerie and strange and terrifying. And then Sushi says, "I stayed because I didn't want any of the other kids to be alone," stating that they were a ghost at the shack where Albert Fish killed multiple children. And it's just like, all of it was terrible. And I like put a cork on the conversation.
Yeah.
I was like, "We're not going to talk about this. This is going to be the last time we talk about it." And I let years and years go by. I think when they were 7 years old, I kind of like, "Do you remember when you said you were a farmer?" And they were like, "What?" It's like, "Okay, I'm just checking. Just seeing if you remember having this conversation." They're like, "No." I'm like, "Okay." But yeah, that was a terribly disturbing series of events. And my fear was that they inherited it because I was a little bit of a serial killer junkie, and I had read, all the books and the stories, and I was invested in those stories, and I worried that somehow it genetically passed, and the rDNA, the RNA passage of knowledge, and they were privy to it. But yeah, it was compelling and frightening.
that just like gave me chills when you said it took me a week to eat her.
Oh,
I'm like,
it shocked me it to the core. Not to mention one time I was playing with a puppet around the same time, and I bonked the puppet on the head to make it pass out, and Sushi, again, I think this was even like 2.5 years old, where she had a kitchen playset and grabbed a kitchen knife, went behind the puppet and pulled the knife across the throat of the puppet and said, "That's how you kill it." Oh. And I was like, okay, we're not going to play this anymore. Because I was like, I didn't kill the puppet. They were very sure that killing was a big part of everything. I had to argue for a long time that Pokemon are not being killed when their eyes go squiggly. I was like, no, I think they're just being knocked out. No, they're dying. That's how you catch a Pokemon. You kill it. And I'm like, okay, creepy child. We are not going to kill cute little animals, right? We're not. That's not what we want to do. We don't feel like killing cute little animals, right? But yeah, it was that was a bizarrely harrowing time.
Yeah, Aubrey's like, what did I agree to come on to?
I'm just thinking, oh my God, I can't watch Pokemon again.
They're not dead.
Are you sure? Because now I have to question everything about my life decisions growing up.
It is a problem because the argument was pretty sound. The argument went on, well, they turn into spirits so they can fit into the ball. At which point I was like, I don't actually have an explanation why they fit into the ball.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it's because they're dead and they turn into ghosts and the ghosts go into the ball. I'm like,
yes, but
no. The balls are special. They're magic.
Yes. Well, I mean, interest in like things of that morbidity, I think, is just human nature for sure. So. I mean, like humans throughout history have always been interested in morbid things, like how in England in the Victorian era, because Victorians were so morbid, y'all.
Morbid.
Like
I love it.
I love it too. It's great. And but like in Europe, they would oftentimes take Jane Does or John Does and put the bodies in the window of the morgue to try to get people to identify it. But really all it did was people would come up and they'd be like, ooh, I want to see the dead body, which is, in theory, like what?
Well, just the common practice of the photography with dead bodies.
Oh, yeah.
If a family member died, you would actually prop them up with the family and they would be sitting on the lap or sitting in the picture. And that did not seem odd at all because they were celebrating and they were, memorializing. But when you look back at it, you're like, oh, all those people are just kind of hanging off of that dead person, and it's kind of creeping me out now.
I mean, I can't say anything because I've got it doesn't seem as creepy if I've got to think about it, but I've got the ashes of various pets in here, so I got dead bodies chilling on my neck, technically, if you really want to think about it.
True.
So.
Well, and that's just it. The way we memorialize the dead has gone through so many changes. I love the idea of turning the ash of a loved one into a diamond.
Oh, yeah.
That compression into a diamond. I'm like, that's amazing. That's beautiful.
Well, and especially now, I feel like we're almost taking back some of the stuff from the Victorians, where we are creating something out of our loved ones or our familiars, where there's people who actually will take blood from past loved ones and make rings out of it, and so that you can have something that was literally pumping through your loved one's body, and it feels very attached. And how people still sometimes nowadays take hair from their loved ones and put it in lockets, just like the Victorians did, or wearing ashes. It's a thing. And human remains in a lot of ways. I mean, if you look at it from a witchcraft perspective, it binds you to them in a certain way. And so if it's your loved one, of course you would want to feel bound to them.
And the fact that there is a natural force that handles the dead, and we've totally disregarded it. We pump the body full of chemicals. We preserve it. We cover it in wax, and we reconstruct it, and then we put it in a box that is hermetically sealed. And it's like, I think we're supposed to feed the grass, or I think we're supposed to re-enter the system. And those practices are all about our fear of death, our fear of decay, our fear of losing life, which I think is coming back with a backlash with all the paranormal experiences that people are having is how long can you pretend death isn't a thing before death really makes you aware of itself, before all these bodies who have, been filled with formaldehyde are saying, hey, I should have been gone by now. My body should have dissolved and re-entered, and I should have, but instead, if you dug me up, I'd look pretty good.
Yeah.
Because I am like a Twinkie now. Oh. Just a Twinkie in the coffin.
Hashtag Twinkie in a coffin. God. Oh God, our fans are gonna have a field day with that one. But it's true though.
Put it on the March list.
But I do. I like the idea, though. I heard this from a tour guide when I was in Edinburgh. Why, when a headstone falls and the earth sort of consumes the headstone, it's almost like you're finally returning back to the earth. And I think that's a very beautiful way of thinking about it. Never thought about, people being pumped with preservatives, and how they would look nowadays. Because I do think about, how olden decomposition would work before we had those types of chemicals, but it's fascinating. Also, if it makes you feel better, I just remembered this. When my mom went into labor with me, she had to spend a certain amount of time counting the contractions and stuff. And so she watched the entire series about Ted Bundy while in labor with me.
Oh, it explains so much.
Oh, it does. It makes a lot of sense. So don't feel like a bad parent for,
for reading up on serial killers so much.
Absolutely. She was like, well, that was what was interesting on TV. And so, we watched Ted Bundy. And I was like, sounds about right. It's on brand.
Do you have a favorite ghost story not set in a place, like a favorite ghost story just
in general?
God, a favorite ghost story in general? Not really.
Interesting.
No. Honestly, I think the paranormal has just always been so normal in my life that I don't think too much of it.
Nothing stands out, right?
Because when I talk to my guests at the tours, and they're like, well, explain something that happened to you, and I'll explain something. They're like, oh, I'd be running, and I'm just sitting there, I was like, it was a Tuesday. Yeah, this is normal. So honestly, no. I don't even really focus too much on the events that occur. I'm more focused on the spirits as people. And it's like, well, let me tell you about this guy that I met that was walking down the street 3 weeks ago, and how he died, and why he's just sitting on the side of the road for.
Is he wearing a purple shirt?
No, he wasn't wearing a purple shirt. No.
We have
a mystery.
we do have a mystery about a spirit I saw a couple days ago in what is that, Troop Square? Yeah, just a random dude, and an African American guy in a purple shirt. Just random, but okay. It is what it is. We're trying to figure out. Oh, we're like, who could he have been? But it's. But I totally get where you're coming from. With it feels normal because people have always questioned me with why I don't freak out when I see ghosts, and I'm just like, well, it's just a ghost. It's
just a person. Yeah. It's like seeing anyone else on the street.
Absolutely, and that was how when JT and I were on FaceTime and he saw the little boy in the Davenport house and he was panicking and he's like, oh my God, my wife is in the house by herself with this ghost and I don't understand it. And I was like, it's all good. It's all good. I'm going to go back downstairs. I'm going to eat my Cheetos and I'm going to just chill. It seems like when you have enough experiences, it's a part of life, it's a part of it. I feel like people who are sensitive, including how I feel, it just is what it is. Mm-hmm. They're just there. They're just chilling. They're just vibing. Sometimes they're not. They're sometimes, very
crazy,
rambunctious. But now, do you have what was your first experience with a spirit in Savannah? I always like to hear people's first Savannah ghost experience.
Oh, goodness gracious. Let's see. Well, as soon as you get to the bridge, you've got the people that have jumped off for suicide.
Oh, yeah.
But I haven't had a chance to actually stop to talk to any of them. Plus, sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. It's kind of a hit or miss. Which just sounds kind of funny in a very bad way. And then when I actually got into town technically I was here mainly for visiting purposes because I live in South Carolina and I work out on Hilton Head at the time. And first time at Grave Face, there was that little boy with blonde hair. And then I meant to bring him a car and I never did, but I always say hi if that counts for anything.
Oh,
whenever
yeah.
I stop by. There's a creepy, I think it's like now an apartment complex building out by City Market. Won't even step onto that property, will not step on that sidewalk. I'll cross the street to avoid that because there's something bad in there and I don't know what it is, but it will stare at you through the windows, which really creeps me out. So that's a big no, and I'll avoid that. There's the lady in blue that's out on Madison Square, and she just attended the church that's there all the time. And then that's where she got married to her husband, so she was familiar with the church for that. And then her husband died, and that's where they had the service. And then she died, that's where they had service. So she always stops by the church, like on a daily basis, like a constant routine for her. And then there's the people at Davenport House that I frequently see sitting in the courtyard. When I used to work at Kehoe, and I'd have to walk by. I could go on and on. River Street, the alleyways, every single block, every single street, there's going to be someone. So the list kind of just, from day one, I was like, all right, I knew it was going to be a haunted city. I guess I wasn't super prepared despite how small the downtown area is, how haunted it is.
It is.
And then when I started learning about the history, I was like, well, yeah, no wonder it's haunted. I'm walking on 20,000 dead bodies that were shoved in a tunnel.
Yes.
Of course this is going to happen. So
Yeah, the way I describe it to people is we're the lasagna of the damned. We're
just layers and layers.
layers of them, It's true. Savannah is such a place where you just got a spirit for everything. And people still die every day. People still,
But worth noting that there are places with worse histories, but not as much activity. And I think a lot of that has to do with the living's attitude towards the paranormal. The fact that for the most part, Savannah as a whole is very open to the concept of ghosts and open to that, which allows for spirits to not be pressured to hide or not to relegate themselves to shadows, because in a lot of cultures, when you're dead, you're shunned. There's a lot of reasons why we have so many variants of how to keep a spirit away. And they come down to fascinating. We were talking about tombstones just a second ago. The belief that to carve a name into stone is to bind the spirit to the stone. So that's where they belong. You can go home. It's like they're stuck to the stone. And when a stone falls over, that's a common belief. If a stone falls over, it means the spirit has released itself from its bond to the stone. But one of the most intriguing ones was a spirit will last as long as their name is legible on the stone. And they're trying to give you as much time to settle affairs and not bug anybody before the legibility on the stone is gone and the spirit is no longer tethered.
Absolutely. We definitely are a town that really loves our ghosts.
Embraces it, yeah.
Yeah, because, even in Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, there's like a quote from it. I don't know the exact quote, but it goes along the lines of, to understand Savannians, you have to understand our ghosts. Because we feel a very deep attachment to them. And I'm not even a native Savannian, but I feel very attached to these spirits, I think they all just it's almost like they love Savannah so much that they couldn't leave,
How could you leave? The living, they'll show up and be like, I'm going to live here.
Yeah, exactly. It's the dark charm of the city that makes even the dead want to stick around a little bit longer. Like, especially, I'm like, I would want to live in the Davenport house if I was a ghost. I may do it. You never know. Because I love those ghosts. They're wonderful. The kid ghosts in there are so fun.
It's like me with the Kehoes, and I gave them the heads up when I was working there. It's like, well, if I die and you want to know if I'm haunting there, check the electrical kettle. I'm a big tea drinker, so it's always going to be hot and ready to go for when anyone. I don't care if it's 3 a.m. What if a guest wants a cup of tea? I gotta make sure the kettle's hot. So that's just gonna be my big thing. And like I said, I do love the Kehoes. They've helped me out a lot. And people sometimes, I guess, don't realize that, yes, spirits are interesting. The paranormal is so fascinating. And it's definitely really cool to investigate, check out all that fun stuff. But also, it is possible for people to form bonds like that between the living and dead, not just to family members. Like, they are my extended family, and I was there long enough to get to know them that I know their habits, I know what they like, I know what they don't like, and they were the same way with me. They knew my habits, my likes, my dislikes. Miss Kehoe would join me at, 1:30 every morning. As soon as I got my paperwork done, we'd have a nice morning cup of tea. And I knew that she would actually join me for tea, because even though I wouldn't set a teacup out, I'd occasionally hear what sounded like a porcelain saucer land on the glass coffee table. So I could hear that being put down. It's like, okay, she's here enjoying the teacup with me.
That's so cute. I love that. I love that idea. Jim, if you're listening, my house ghost, Jim, if you're listening, we're going to have coffee in the mornings. I want my ghost to have coffee with me. Yeah, it is true. You can form bonds with people as a spirit, because they're still a soul. Mm-hmm. They still can have an attachment to you. I know that you have said that you have your own spirits that kind of follow you around, because we talk about, people are more likely to be haunted than houses. Mm-hmm. So do you have, you want to talk about any of your spirits that kind of stick with you?
I've got one, and I like her because she's so different. And this kind of falls into, again, the random 5 million paranormal theories that everyone has. Some people do believe that people, and especially this usually pertains to spirit guides, can transform into different, everything. So I've got this one little girl, and of course it's always a kid. Why is it always a kid?
They love you.
But I don't like children. So I've got a little girl that's, I don't know, probably like 7 years old. And she's in this cute little white lace, almost like a Lolita little dress. And she's got her white gloves with the lace trim. And she's got her hair that's all blonde and curly, and it's always kind of pinned back. She's an adorable, sweet little thing. But she can also turn into a cat. So sometimes if she's not in her little kid form, she'll be this white poofy cat, like from the commercial.
The season.
Fancy Feast?
Yeah, Fancy Feast, yeah.
Yeah, so you'll see that cat running around, and she's usually pretty good at helping me out. I remember one time, back when I was in Maryland, I was backing out my driveway, and I look in my rearview mirror, and I just see her standing there. So I slam the brakes. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to hit a kid. And I'm glad I did, because there was apparently a living cat behind my car that was crossing. So I was like, good, make sure I don't run over a cat. Thank you for that. And she's usually always around. And then there's also an older lady, because my relationship with my mother is not exactly the best relationship that anyone would want to have. Could be worse, but still not pleasant. And so, lack of a mother figure, I do also have an older lady that looks like the old lady from Aristocrats. So she's got gray hair, and she's also kind of in that nice dress and everything. And if I have a nightmare and I wake up, because sometimes I do have not so nice spirits follow me around, and they'll give me nightmares and stuff. I'll wake up with bruises and scratches. And when I wake up from those, I'm freaking out, nightmare, crying, very uneasy. And I'll just feel her kind of brushing my hair and be like, it's okay, calm down, get you back to sleep. And so that also is a great support system, because I've got this little girl that kind of watches out for everything. Also, I like animals, so the fact that she's a cat is a bonus.
Yeah.
And then I've got a new mother figure that sticks around, and then I've got I think my uncle has recently joined me as well. He died last year, and I'm not sure if he's here for a main support group for me.
Sure.
But also I happen to have his car, which is a limited edition Pebble Beach Lexus. There were only 2,000 made. So he may also just be watching out to make sure that I don't mess up his car. So I'm not 100% sure where he's standing on that. But he also, I've noticed he can pop by quite a bit as well.
Yeah. See, that is an interesting point about spirit guides that people don't talk about enough, is that a lot of times people say if spirit guides, you can only communicate with them through divination practices and things like that. And they're only there really to give you guidance with your tarot cards or whatever you're doing. But it's true. A lot of times they are just with you, and sometimes they physically manifest. Personally, my grandmother, who's my main spirit guide, I've got quite a few, but she's my main one. She shows up as a fiery red cardinal. She was a fiery woman in life in general, but if something that I need to if I'm not picking up on, or I'm not paying attention to, she'll literally show up as a cardinal at a window and go and just peck until I get the hint. I'm like, oh, she's trying to make something clear to me. She does it to JT now because, and she does it to my dad because it was his mother. He gets her sometimes, so it's a thing, you know. Sometimes your spirit guides come in ways that you can notice them, and sometimes they show up as physical human forms, and sometimes it's animals. It's why a lot of times you hear people say, you know, butterflies. I see butterflies, and that's how I know. Like, do you not like butterflies?
Oh, I have a serious fear of butterflies.
Oh, really?
And then when I found out that monarchs are apparently omnivores and can eat human flesh, nope. I got a problem
they
here.
really?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It's not okay. There are problems. And also the SpongeBob episode didn't help either.
Oh, yeah.
So, no, I don't do well with butterflies.
I didn't know monarchs were omnivores. That's fascinating. I have a big butterfly bush in my backyard. So don't come over, I guess.
Oh, I'm good. I'll
to
pass.
the backyard.
That's a good pass.
But yeah, we have big monarchs that show up in our backyards. And now every time I'm going to look at it and be like, you've been eating human flesh recently? That's fascinating. Wow. Yeah, but it is an interesting thing with spirit guides, though, that they show up in whatever way you are going to feel that connection to, and what helps you, because that is their point. Their purpose is to help guide you, help be your support system through a spiritual sense. So whatever is going to make you feel supported is how they're going to go about. So super fascinating. Now, in the sense of like Savannah spirits, do you have a favorite haunted location?
I guess I'm going to have to keep sticking with Kehoe. Again, that
Sure,
is like my
absolutely.
extended family. And one of my favorite parts about my job was that I got to educate the living about, you know, debunking and trying to explain to everyone that, no, their kids didn't die. And I've worked there, again, for 3 years, but I was also there during quarantine. So for the, 8 months I think we were closed, from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 5 nights a week, I was there, completely empty haunted bed and breakfast. So that was another great way for me to get to kind of know everyone and know what their habits were, because we were just cramped in a house together. So, of course, what else are we going to do? Might as well talk and get to learn about each other. And while I was there, I decided to do like a deep dive history research. I've gotten like multiple newspaper articles about Mr. Kehoe, his family being here, the building of the foundry that he had, everything. I even have actually the registration from when his family came from Wexford, Ireland to Savannah. I've got that documentation as well. Learning about Miss Kehoe, and conveniently, her family was also originally from Wexford Island as well. So it was kind of an odd close-knit that they just happened to run into each other when they came to Savannah. And yeah, I do have a deep fondness of that family. I remember there was one time that some guests brought in a spirit box. I was nosy. They were out at dinner reservations. I decided, a spirit box. I know what that is. Let me see what I can do. So I did turn it on briefly and was like, hey, is there anyone here with me? And I just got instantly, in a gentleman's voice, which would be Mr. Kehoe, heard you, Aubrey. I'm like, oh, thanks, guys. Now I know. So I've got that also confirmation that, you know, I could easily be in my own head of, you know, I know that they're here, so they know that I'm here and that we're all going to get along perfectly fine. But having that, like, verbal confirmation as well is kind of going to give me that big, good, it's not residual. It's definitely some intelligent spirit that's here at the time, and it is them.
Wow. Yeah, that's such a cool experience to have, because I feel like a lot of people don't get to actually like really get to know the spirits in Savannah, because it's hard to be able to spend that much time in a place where you would be able to get to know them and that deeply. But I wish you had like the recording of Mr. Kehoe talking, because I always love hearing when things catch on a spirit box. But
and especially to include my name nonetheless.
Yeah.
Like, that's
absolutely.
especially really, really impressive as well. And even when I wasn't there, like if I had the night off or anything, and I still have had some guests that had come back, even though I'm not working there, ask about me, because we'd occasionally get mediums. And they're like, oh, you know, yeah, you guys have quite a few spirits here. Oh, there's one other girl. Yeah, the one that they really like. There's a girl here that brings toys for everyone to play with. She works the night shift. oh, and they mentioned me. It's like, yeah, that's her. But this is a person that I've never met before. So the fact that the spirits are conveying to these mediums, yes, talk to them about Aubrey. You've got to meet her. She's apparently this great girl. And I do bring toys in for the kids. Again, not a big fan of living. Love the dead. So I'll bring toys for them, whatever makes them happy.
Yeah, well, that's a great way to honor them too, and that's why we leave things on headstones and why we leave offerings for ancestors and things of that nature, because it's there's, like we've said before, they're still souls. They still can feel that kindness that you're getting from that sort of thing. So definitely. Now, personally, I would say like one of the creepiest places in Savannah is Wright Square. Have you ever had an experience in Wright Square?
Honestly, I haven't had that many. I also don't spend a lot of time there. I'm usually just rushing past for one thing or another. Wright Square Antiques, though, I've had a few experiences there.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, the CVS, most haunted CVS in the United States. Of course, I've had experiences there as well. And then also Olfactory. Those are my three most visited locations on Wright Square. Since I do spend more time there, that's mainly where I start to notice anyone or anything that's in the area.
Yeah. CVS is so fun to talk about because people don't believe you when you say like this CVS is haunted, and they're like, no, it's not. It's a CVS, and it's like, but it is though.
Oh yeah, I mean, when they first opened, they were going to be a 24-hour CVS, which is desperately needed in downtown.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So and freestanding CVSs that aren't 24 hours are kind of rare. You just don't see freestanding CVSs that weren't 24 hours, especially at the time that this one opened, and it was 24 hours. For about a month. And then they went to midnight, and then they went to 10, and then they went to 8. And it was because the workers were like, this is not good. Mm-hmm, we do not want to be here. And they basically tested it. They're like, we'll go till midnight. And they're like, not good. We'll go to 10, not good. And so at 8, they close at 8, which should tell you a lot because it is a busy city. It's a college town. It's in need of a drugstore that is open late.
The bars are open until 3 a.m.
Right,
so
exactly.
Anyone that's in town is usually going to be out until 3 or 4.
Exactly. And so the fact that it closes at 8 might be the best indication you can have, because they're turning down money. They're turning down cash money for the welfare, or for the perceived welfare of people who are like, I don't want to be here after dark.
Yeah, because the problem is they couldn't keep employees because things were flying off of shelves. There were, Yeah,
supposedly there was security footage from, but corporate was like, lock that down. That is not going out. You're not sharing this.
Yeah.
It's like, just lock it down. And I almost think it was a bargaining chip in the whole process of changing the hours.
Yeah. I feel like, though, that would have been the best marketing tactic ever, and be like, here's footage of the most haunted CVS in America. So, and people would just go to CVS and be like, is there a ghost in here?
I think there's a lot of liability, though.
Sure.
Issue-wise, like,
somebody gets hit with a cereal box from a...
No, people going in and like, drawing blood to, try to,
Isn't there a haunted subway somewhere?
Is there?
Yeah, I think the subway was built on top of what was originally like a haunted building, and apparently people would come into the subway and play with a Ouija board. I can't remember which building it was.
Yeah, I think that there was a period of time when, because there was a Kmart that was also like that, the haunted Kmart somewhere, where people would like sneak in and like try to have these little, seances and things. And it's like, calm down. It's still a store.
That's when you start making rules.
Retail.
All right, you can do it, but you got to buy $50 worth of merchandise.
There you go.
Sales tactic.
If you want to contact the dead, you have to buy your products. That's about it.
We sell Ouija boards in aisle 17.
The paranormal investigation.
So anybody out there who has a haunted retail place,
there you go. That's your
tactics.
That's your marketing tactic, is say that you're super haunted and then sell paranormal equipment.
I'm just shocked there isn't a paranormal investigation supply store in town, like a really well developed. Because there are some places where you can buy little bits and pieces, but you'd be surprised. Savannah practically, writes its own paranormal check at that point. You should have a store that's like, buy this kit, buy this.
Yeah.
Here's a camera. We've removed all the IR filters. We go at it.
Exactly. Well, so many people come here and they want to learn how to paranormal investigate. But people are like, well, where do I get the equipment? I'm like, Amazon.
Yeah, Amazon.
It's literally, if you didn't know that already, you can literally buy things on Amazon.
Create a dropship store to paranormal.
Yeah, right. Because I show some different paranormal investigation tools when I give tours and stuff, and people are like, well, where can I buy that? Like, it must be like a very like niche kind of store. I'm like, I literally got these on Amazon.
Yeah,
That's about it. It's so readily available nowadays, which is great for, us because like people like us, because, we can say like, oh, I want to go investigate in this cemetery or whatever. And then you can just have your paranormal investigation kit in 2 days, which is super cool. But yeah, have you ever been on a paranormal investigation?
Only at the Sorrel-Weed house. However, that is potentially going to change because I had a lady take one of my tours, and apparently she was a tour guide for the Winchester Mansion, which has been on my bucket list for a while now. And thanks to my lovely guests that keep taking my tours, I've been developing a roadmap throughout the U.S. of every single spot I need to stop based on where they're from. But I do currently have a trip set up to go to San Francisco coming up in, I believe, February or March. And I've got Winchester marked down and I've got Alcatraz marked down. So
Nice.
I am looking into those and potentially seeing what I can do there, just out of curiosity. So I'll see how that goes. Now, obviously, there are limits. As much as I love the paranormal, there are limits to how much I'm willing to do. There are some places I don't feel comfortable going. And if I am to go, limits of how comfortable I feel staying. So that's going to be kind of one of those. I know especially Alcatraz has like a 4-hour, 5-hour tour. And that may just be a tad bit too much for me. And that happens for a lot of sensitive mediums. Sometimes it can just be way too overwhelming because spirits can usually tell, and they're like, oh my God, this person can see me, they can talk to me. And so I don't want to be bombarded with, say, 20 people at a time, because I'm just going to mentally get drained. I'm going to shut down. May or may not need to call the paramedics to get a blood transfusion. I don't know. So just to be on the safe side, I may have to limit it to just a basic 2-hour, but I'll see how it goes, and I'll report back when that time comes around.
Absolutely. You should definitely check out Lake Shawnee Abandoned Amusement Park if you ever make it up towards West Virginia, because the kid ghosts would love you. It's all kid ghosts. It literally is. It's we just went there recently, and it was the same way, where they were like, she can see me, she can see me, and I was like, oh, hello everybody, which is fun. But they do overnight ones, which I would like to do to a certain degree, but honestly, the ghosts were even active during the day, so it wasn't even necessary. And they do a great job, because they literally, you take the tour, and then they're like, you just gotta be off the property by 6, and that was it. So they literally just let us kind of go around and do what we wanted, which was super cool. But yeah, that definitely should be on your bucket list. But I am very jealous that you're going to the Winchester Mansion.
I'm excited. I like the movie. I know the stories. And even just for an architect standpoint,
Yeah.
like I have to go.
Absolutely. I mean, they during COVID, the Winchester Mansion did this thing where they had live streams that you could watch of the Winchester Mansion. So of course I did that during my quarantine. But yeah,
We're living in such a technological age. It's shocking that people aren't outfitting a lot of these very famous haunted places with infrared cameras that you can access on 24-hour streams, because it's about, most ghost investigations only last an hour to 4. It's a very concentrated period of time, and then a lot of times ghost hunters walk away being like, well, there's nothing there because I didn't feel it. And it's like, well, you were there for a fraction
exactly
of its existence, and you were also there, pointedly there to exploit or to find, or a lot of the energy you bring into a ghost investigation is the very energy that spirits might try to stay away from. So it is an interesting thing that if you get the opportunity to be in a place regularly, repeatedly, you are developing a sense of space and energy, and everything around you is kind of conforming to the fact that you're there, and that you're always going to be present there. And they get very attached, and the attachments are not just spiritual, it's environmental. You can really change the environment you're in by being open and being receptive.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I wonder, in the sense of the Kehoe House, because you spent so much time there, I wonder if you've left a residual haunting there of sorts.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah, because we talk about how, like, even the living can haunt places of sorts. So I feel like because you had such a bond with that house, I wouldn't be surprised people are like, oh, there's this new ghost that I've started seeing around the house.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And what's really interesting about it is, again, I was just going there for a job interview, and a few days prior, I was exploring Savannah, getting to learn about the area, and there was one house that I was like, oh my God, this house is gorgeous. If I ever win the lottery, I'm gonna live here. I'm in love with this house. And then I ended up working at Kehoe, realized that the house that I was in love with was right across the square. Found out that was the original Kehoe house. That was the house that Mr. and Miss Kehoe initially lived in. And I was like, so my connection with the Kehoes actually started long before I had worked there, like a week before I even got the job or knew about them. So I thought it was kind of interesting how that just placed into in a way.
Absolutely. I feel like everybody in Savannah has that one house that they're like, if I won the lottery, that would be the one that JT and I have a house like that. It's over on Warren Square, I believe. It's off of East Bryan Street. It's this big yellow house. It's got like a really pretty wraparound porch. Don't know what the hauntings are inside it. It's a private residence. But one day, if we're rich enough, we will knock on their door and be like, how much you want for this house? Because I love it. It is so beautiful. But that is crazy, though, that it was the original Kehoe house. Maybe you have a soul connection with the Kehoes.
I was wondering that because it all just conveniently worked out so well, and we all just got along with each other so well. And it's just like, this is going too smoothly. Something's going on. How is this going on? And the more time I spend in Savannah, I have started to notice that the chances of me having a previous life here are, I'd probably put it at a solid 97% chance that it happened. And I actually, starting a few months ago, since I've been initially, when I started working at Kehoe, I would limit my expansion of exploring Savannah to the downtown, anything that was north of Oglethorpe. Then I started working at the Sorrels, so then it was anything that was north of Liberty. And now I'm just casually expanding outwards. And I started getting flashes in my head on occasions when I'm down here of a house that's I've never seen before. I don't know where it is, but I know that for some reason it's somewhere in the southeastern section in Midtown. I've never seen it. I don't know where it is. So now I'm wondering, was that my original house when I lived here initially? I don't know. So it's one of those things where the more I spend in Savannah, the more I'm curious about, is there more to these hauntings? And I'm realizing that maybe I actually am currently already haunting a house, and then I've got my soul that somehow ended up here, and so now I'm here again. And
it happens. It really does. A lot of people have reported that they, see like a house in their dreams, like their entire life, and then they end up going to that house, and they're like, wait, this is a house that I know for a fact I lived here at some point. And so it's very possible your soul just kind of found its way back over to Savannah.
It took me a solid 9-hour drive, but I'm working on it.
Working on it. Yeah. Well, this has been great, though. I really have enjoyed, talking about all these theories and stuff like that. We don't always go into, past life regression and stuff like that. So it's fun to talk about for sure. And I've learned so much about the Kehoe ghost from you, because I'm glad that we're finally able to actually talk about, what the actual spirits are there, because there's just, like I've said, so much misinformation with those spirits. And so it's good to hear that they're just a bunch of sweet ghosts. So go stay at the Kehoe House for sure. It's a beautiful house in general.
Beautiful, absolutely.
So if you're looking for a romantic getaway or something, that is definitely the place to go. But Chris, do you have a ghost tip for us before we end things?
Yes. Don't ghost hunt alone. Always bring a group, but don't bring too many people, because that also is counterproductive. But when you're using any equipment, cameras or anything like that, be sure to let each person use a piece of equipment, because the person holding the equipment is oftentimes the determinant as to whether or not any evidence will be caught. One person could be using a camera, hand it to another person, the next person uses the camera and catches something. And the reason for that is spirits do still, even with equipment, gravitate towards the sensitive and towards those people who are open enough to experience it.
That's a good ghost tip. So, wow, awesome. Well, we are, as always, on TikTok. If you want to follow us over there at the Savannah Underground, if you want to become a part of the Parajunkie fam, yes, if you haven't heard, that is our new fan base name. Thanks to Patreon, our patrons have decided that that's what it's going to be. So if you want to get further into that and join our Patreon, you can find us at patreon.com/Savannah Underground. And we will see you in the next one. So my name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And stay spooky, y'all.